can we ask more than was accomplished by that aircraft carrier Hornet, which now lies in glory in the blue waters of the South Pacific? From the Hornet's broad flight deck soared the bombers, which pledged with flaming blasts at Tokyo America's determination that Pearl Harbor shall be avenged. The Hornet was in for the kill at Midway. The Hornet won more than her share of glory in the Solomons campaign. In her death, the Hornet made doubly sure that she would not die. And we say, in confidence and with pride, the Hornet is dead. Long live the Hornet.
All right, so welcome to the USS Hornet. This place is legendary. It's a tale of two Hornets. When you hear about the Hornet in World War II, part one is with USS Hornet CV-8, which took part in the early part of the war. Halfway through, the war got sunk. The ship we're on, which is a museum now, is USS Hornet CV-12. This is the namesake of that one. And that took over all the campaigns in the second half, the back half of the war. And its status is legendary. And we have a lot to share with you today about all the battles it participated in.
The story of the USS Hornet, a tale that every American should know, begins in 1940 in the docks of Virginia.
The story of the Hornet has a special meaning. These were the men and women who, in 1940, had worked on her hull at Newport News, Virginia. Other thousands of them had rolled her steel in Gary and in Pittsburgh, while Bethlehem, Pennsylvania had milled the close tolerances of her guns. It was skill and speed, the effort and determination with which each worker made the big things and made the small that counted on the Hornet. She was launched in December 1940 ahead of schedule. One of the Hornet workers said,
"She had character, that ship. She was rugged, built from the ground up like a heavyweight champ. We knew that we had made her a good ship and that she would do a job wherever she would fight. And that's the way we felt about the Hornet."
Now that she was launched, she would need a crew. And what would one have to do in order to become a crew member on the USS Hornet?
From the top of the flight deck to where the seawater would be is 60 feet. So if you want to be in the Navy, especially if you're a naval aviator or you're going to be on an aircraft carrier, there's only one thing they make you do in swim school.
Jump from here?
You got to jump. You have to jump off a 60-foot diving board.
Oh, from up here?
60. Well, this is probably 50, but up here. Yeah, from up here. So all you have to do is, if you just got to walk off
to the water
from up here.
Josh, from up there.
To the water?
Yeah, just got to. If you can leap off that.
And then you gotta come up?
You just got to get off the ship. And the main reason why is because if you have to abandon ship,
right,
you don't want a bunch of dudes going, whoa, no, I don't want to go. No, and then like there's 1,000 dudes like, dude, go. Yeah. So that's why it's like no reflex, you just jump. One of my favorite guys that I got to meet, his name is Verge Bloomquist. And that's all he had to do to pass his swim test. Just jump. Because the war was so we need guys.
They just needed body.
Yeah. And he said he climbed the ladder, and as he was climbing the ladder, there was a guy at the very top, and the guy at the very top was being kind of scared, and there was a Marine at the top of the plank, and he would make sure that you would go. He would make sure. So the guy was at the edge, and then the guy wasn't gonna go. The Marine just pushed him, and then as Bird was climbing the ladder, he was thinking to himself, he's like, I'm not gonna be like that guy. That guy's a weenie, And then as he got there and he got to the top, he was like, oh my gosh, I'm this guy now, because his knees were all wobbling. So yeah, he says every guy had that same feeling as they got up there. And then this big scary Marine guy just shuts you.
and the sons and brothers of many an American worker were to man the Hornet, were to fly her planes and fire her guns and drive her into battle.
There were hundreds of different positions on a carrier, and each crew member had to know how to do it flawlessly. Some of these roles could include having a position in the anti-aircraft guns, the command center, the bridge, and many more. George will tell us about some of these shortly, but the one thing they all had in common was where they slept and lived.
Lockers. Oh, a locker. See? Put your stuff. That's about all you're allowed to bring aboard. Make it fit. Where should I sleep tonight? Let's see. Top, middle, bottom. I guess you gotta go in like Superman style. That's it, dude. This is pretty much it. You, a bunch of other fellas snoring, chatting, all sorts of sounds and smells, trying to sleep. Good luck. But on top of that, you're hearing every other sound on the ship. And sometimes you're just awakened by battle stations. So that can be a little bit of an eye-opener. No coffee needed.
Once all of the crew were assigned to the USS Hornet and training preparations were underway, she was ready to be commissioned, and one of the most famous stories of the Pacific War began.
On October 20th, 1941, the officers and men of the Hornet stood to attention, smartly in Navy fashion, as their captain took command and as the Secretary of the Navy spoke to them of the job to be done.
We're holding this little ceremony, which makes of the Hornet the seventh of its name, a ship of the Navy. As the civilian head of that organization, I give you a fervent God bless you and God go with you.
The commissioning of the USS Hornet could not have come at a better time. This carrier, CV-8, was put into service just before the attack on Pearl Harbor took place. This thrust the United States into World War II. And with this action, the new carrier was now at war. Being at war, the Hornet had to make sure that she was ready for battle, and without a doubt, the most important part of her battle capability and readiness was the air crews and aircraft that she carried into battle. It would be here, in these tasks, that the most important and dangerous jobs would be, on and around the flight deck.
Then at sea on her shakedown cruise came weeks of training, never-ending flight operations for the squadrons and for the ship's company. The Hornet, her planes and her men were learning to fight as a team, learning to rely on each other and on the machines American workers at home had built for them.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is, from here, planes take off. Planes take off from this direction here, and they land back there as they're coming in. That little ledge right there, that's where the air boss would be, and they could peer over that window and see everything going on the flight deck. The air boss is in charge of everything on this flight deck and everything that flies and lands on top of it. If it's not flying, it's not his business, but if it is, he's the boss. So I can't imagine the view that he had up there, everything going on during World War II and all the calls he had to make and decisions of people had to get waved off or who got to come in or what squadron was going up or next or... All right, so here we are at Pri-Fly. This would be primary flight control, and this is the station where they would be in charge of everything, taking off and landing. And right in here, you could see that's where the air boss would be sitting, that cushy seat way down there. And, you know, at first glance, you're like, oh, why are the windows shaped like that? Well, so you can lean over and see what's going on. So I'm sure a lot of noses were smushed over there to see. But this would have been such a awesome spot to be in, to see everything. You know, if you love warbirds, that would be the #1 spot to be. And if you're really into aviation and you talk to a naval aviator and you call them a pilot, they'll correct you and be like, excuse me, naval aviator. Don't call them a pilot, because the pilot means like, oh, I could just fly and land on land. A naval aviator is also trained to land on a moving runway in the ocean with pitching deck and crosswinds. So I know there's a lot of point of pride of correctly calling a naval aviator someone if they've flown. Just they go, oh, okay. This is where the landing signal officer would stand, and he would have a couple flags. And let's say an airplane was coming in too hot and he'd have to leap out of the way, he would jump into that net. And a lot of this stuff is post-World War II, but back in the day, all they used were flags. So a guy out there with a flag, and you're kind of like coming in and trusting that guy with your whole life. Like, dude, bring me home, and that guy's your hero. He's like, that whole person is the most important person in your life right now, that LSO.
Landing at sea is a fine art, which depends on perfect teamwork between the pilot and the signal officer. Once in a while, a plane went into the gallery. But practice makes perfect in training aviators, and the captain kept the planes coming aboard until landings under all conditions became second nature to the flyers and to the men of the ship. Hornet was getting ready to engage the enemy.
Once every crew member knew their job and could perform it time and time again perfectly, they were ready for combat. But this first combat would be something that no crew member could have ever expected. The USS Hornet would be selected to lead her country into the fight with the first major offensive raid of the war. And, fascinatingly, George's grandfather in 1942, who was stationed near the USS Hornet, actually played a small role in preparing for this legendary raid.
But this pier right here, this is the same pier that they all docked in. Naval Air Station Alameda.
Back in the day?
Yeah, so this whole thing was a base out here. My grandpa was stationed right there in the barracks.
Oh, okay.
Over there. Him and his buddies in Air Group 11, they were all woken up one night and told to come aboard to help do some work. And what they did was they were loading 500-pound bombs down this pier up on a carrier that had B-25s on it. And they were like, what the hell is this? Why is there Air Force planes on a Navy ship? And then they said, stop talking, you know, like
Just put the bombs
just put the bombs up there, dude. And then later on, they found out that was for the Doolittle Raid.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow, so he was out here.
He was right here. Yeah, I think it's.
Because that was
See
April.
that? See where that ferry ship is?
Yeah.
Right behind that. That's one of the older style World War II buildings right there.
Wow.
So you can kind of yeah, because this base was decommissioned in 1995. And it was like one of the last memories I have of my grandpa, because he took me here when it was closing.
Really?
So we went
That's
driving
cool.
around. I think we got like Wendy's and got like a milkshake.
Heck yeah.
And he was like, see this place? This used to be something. I was like, what? And then years later, I'm like, yeah, it is. Yeah.
The 16 big B-25 bombers were lashed securely to the deck. The Hornet's men got along famously with the Army. They realized the importance of the Army flyer's mission. The sailors liked the idea of the colonel returning to the Mikado with Captain Mitcher's respects, a medal with which the Emperor had once decorated the captain. On the 18th of April, 800 miles from the shores of Japan, on the carrier's deck as she bit into the choppy waves, the Army planes were made ready for their takeoff. Each of them weighed 27,000 pounds and had a wingspread of almost 68 feet, only a few feet less than the width of the ship itself. A crew member telling his part of the story later said,
"On the takeoff, the wing tips hung over the port side, and on the starboard cleared the island structure by only 3 or 4 feet. The planes were airborne even before they reached the end of the flight deck. Colonel Doolittle dipped his wings to Admiral Halsey and to us, and disappeared into the clouds. We gave them all a cheer and wished them good luck, because we knew where they were going. Tokyo.
The mission these bombers then completed brought war and destruction to the cities of the enemy. And as the carrier and its task force turned away into the Pacific, there arose the famous legend about Hornet, the legend of Shangri-La. To Washington and the world from Tokyo on April 18, 1942, came the most startling war news since December 7th. News of the bombing by U.S. planes of the capital of the Empire of Japan. News soon followed by a statement from the President that the planes had taken off from a mysterious base identified only as Shangri-La. But what and where this Shangri-La was remained for a year a closely guarded military secret. And then in April 1943, when news came again from Tokyo, this time grim news, that the enemy had assassinated some of the brave soldier flyers who had soared to destiny from Shangri-La, it was finally revealed that mysterious Shangri-La had been a United States aircraft carrier, the now famous USS Hornet.
Following the Doolittle Raid in April of 1942, the USS Hornet steamed back towards Pearl Harbor, and then, in late May, with nearly no rest at all, headed towards a new island, Midway. This time, however, she would have no Army bombers, but instead her naval aviators. This included one squadron who would go down as one of the most tragic sacrifices in the history of the United States Navy.
And later aboard the Hornet came the men of Torpedo Squadron 8, who would take the battle to the enemy at Midway. Of the 30 officers and men who flew off the Hornet in this squadron, only Ensign George Gay was to return. Radio man George Field on his left would be killed. Ensign Gay said,
Here's our skipper, Lieutenant Commander John Charles Waldron, and Horace Dobbs as rear seat gunner. They would be killed. And so would Lieutenant Jimmy Owens, our exec, and Emilio Maffey. My friend Ensign Plywood Teets would die, and so would Hollis Martin. And Ensign Bill Robinson from Boston would meet his end with Ross Bibb. All except me in a hot few minutes. We roared off the Hornet for the Battle of Midway on June 4th, 1942. I'll never forget the last thing our skipper said.
I want each of us to do his utmost to destroy our enemies. If there's only one plane left to make the final run in, I want that man to go in and get a hit. May God be with us all. Good luck, happy landings, and give 'em hell.
Attack was the watchword of Torpedo 8, and attack was in the minds of the men of the Hornet, who, over the radio, listened to the planes of Torpedo 8 as they went in for their last attack against 4 big Japanese carriers. Midway was one of the great naval victories of all time and forestalled an invasion of the continental United States. And in this victory, Torpedo 8 set an example of daring and of faith which should inspire all Americans. Those who died in the Battle of Midway were true sons of the Navy and true sons of the Hornet.
After the Battle of Midway, the Hornet came back to Pearl. Here, she received some rest and minor updates to things like her anti-aircraft guns. After this, she was assigned to provide air cover in the Solomon Islands. She served this role well until October 24th of 1942. On this date, she was joined by the USS Enterprise and was sent to intercept a large Japanese naval force that was reported to be closing in on Guadalcanal. What would come next would be one of the most critical moments in the fight for the Pacific, the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. As the Hornet and her crew were on their way to the battle, however, one thing had been made clear from their recent combat. The unsung heroes of an American carrier made evident by the Battle of Midway was without a doubt the gunners. This job was now as important as anyone else's.
Gunnery officers went over the guns again and again, analyzing the lessons learned at Midway. For having tasted blood at Midway, each gun captain wanted his crew to be the best on the ship.
So this little mystery right here is an anti-aircraft gun. And yeah, here's a shell we got right here. Now, this is not light, so you can imagine you have like people just hand this to you. You're going in here, you're stuffing it in there. This is something you got to do fast, so I can only imagine busted fingers, busted hands, just getting busted, just loading this thing. And then just boom. And you could come around here and see that there's all manner of bicycle seats for people to operate this thing. It's not just a one-person thing. You know, this is there's a handful of people that need to run this to make it work. And it's a great view. But it's not like, oh, here's the main person right here. He's the one firing, aiming, shooting. Now, there's another person here sitting backwards looking at this reading. There's another person on the other side. There's another person, you know, shouting, yelling. There's all sorts of instruments. And this is one of the few places where the instruments are all sealed and covered. Everything else on the ship is tactile, but yeah. Can you imagine being right here and the sound it would make right next to you? And this thing is like swiveling with all the gears. Turning out this way. Choom. Choom.
As fate would have it, at Santa Cruz, these AA crews would be faced with a force the likes of which had never been seen.
Then it came. October 26, 1942, the day of the Battle of Santa Cruz.
About 0900, word came from our air group to expect a large number of Jap bombers. We stood by for the attack. The first of the Japs came into range about 0930, and our gunners opened fire. There were two different attacks during the day, and every Jap plane that got through our fighter screen was shot down by the Hornet's guns. 26 of them in 10 hours. First wave, a torpedo on the starboard side had smashed our engine room. And in the second attack, the Japs hit us with everything in the book, bombs and torpedoes at the same time. our gunners continued to pump lead into the Japs, adding to our score, plane by plane. 3 Japs crashed aboard and started fires. With the engine room out, our power was gone. We lost steerage way and listed heavily to starboard.
Here, as the Hornet is taking serious damage and fires are starting, let's take a look at another forgotten job on board of a carrier in World War II: damage control.
One of the things that the American ships did much better than the Japanese was they were all pretty well trained with fire control. So at any given moment, if you were a gunner or you also, you didn't wait for someone else to do the fire, you know, I don't know how to use this or it's not my job. It's like everyone was much more well trained in case something bad happened. It's like, run it out, let's go, let's go. Run it down that way, you know, like this. I gotta help put out, you know, there could be a plane right here, guys smoking, just right here on standby. So everybody's job was wearing different hats, so someone needed help. You were trained for fire control.
However, in some circumstances, even the most well-trained damage control crews in the world were not enough to prevent disaster.
Later, during a lull in the battle, we organized bucket brigades. We flooded port compartments, but still listed to starboard 18 degrees. Knowing that we were in range of land-based Japanese bombers, and that it would no longer be possible to fight a ship that couldn't be righted, our skipper ordered us to abandon ship. We went over the side around 1700 and were taken aboard the rescue ship standing by. You could see our Hornet lying out there, deserted and sort of lonely. Somehow she seemed to struggle to stay alive. We hated to leave her, but the skipper knew best.
Now, normally, for a moment like this, we would not be able to provide much more detail of the inner workings of an aircraft carrier in a disaster situation. But it just so happened that in our tour of the Hornet, we stumbled across one of the most knowledgeable volunteers at the floating museum, Bob Baker, a docent at the museum for more than 20 years.
You know, Bob's been here since the very beginning as a volunteer.
Yep.
Look at his badge number.
2.
Number 2. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
My badge number is like 14,000 something.
And this is the top secret.
Oh, the mail bags.
Yeah, those aren't mail bags.
Oh.
Pick one up.
Hey,
Pick it up.
I can't. They're stuck to the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, this is where you put the security.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, in case we were being boarded and code books would have been kept in that safe there. They would be dumped in here, any classified material, go out this hatch right here over the side of the ship, throw it in the water, and away you go.
Oh, it has the. I see it lifts this up. Oh. And then just crawl out there and just dump it.
Oh, go either port or starboard.
Wow.
And with the weighted bottom.
Yeah.
You know, all your code books and all the classified stuff would be gone. Guy's like a little kid.
Yeah, sounds a little. I've never been in here. This is cool.
You can imagine the racket.
Oh yeah, all the.
Here.
Yeah, like this. If you were to. Which button turned this one on?
This button here.
Let me try it. Oh. Ready?
Yeah. And it's not even typing. Yeah, I don't.
Whoa.
But you had 1, 2, and then all these guys, and these
All
were
going?
tape. I don't know what they were. Tape
Reel to
readers.
reel. Something, no?
Yeah, tape. Yeah. Yeah. Those are burn bags. Down in Hangar Bay 2, you know where you come up to go up to the escalator? Just to the right of that is where the incinerator was. So if you had classified stuff you wanted to burn and go in the burn bag, you'd have a Marine go down there with you, you'd throw it in and burn it up.
This is like one of the spots I was saying where there's like no sunshine.
Yeah.
All day you're down here. You're like, hey, what's the weather like out there? How are we doing out there?
It would be the rooms like this that would be the center of activity in an abandoned ship order, destroying all key documents and anything else that was to be kept from the enemy. Now, interestingly, there is also one key detail that was omitted from this 1942 newsreel. Let's listen to see what the film says about the fate of the USS Hornet.
We hated to leave her, but the skipper knew best. And just as night came down to make her death quick and merciful, our captain ordered our own gunners to shell her and torpedo her. We knew how he must have felt giving orders to sink our ship when she had fought bravely in so many battles and had in her career shot down scores of Jap planes and damaged or sunk about 50,000 tons of enemy merchant shipping and over 200,000 tons of Jap warships.
Pause. Did you catch it? The film makes it seem like they finished sinking the USS Hornet, but that isn't completely accurate. What this film leaves out is that the crippled USS Hornet did not go down at the hands of the American fleet. As the US Navy attempted to scuttle her, she actually absorbed 9 torpedoes in the water, most of which failed to explode. And then more than 400 5-inch rounds from American destroyers. While they were still attempting to sink the Hornet, a Japanese force sailed into the area, where, after the Americans left the area, Imperial Navy destroyers finally finished her off, with torpedoes that worked. At the end of the day, the Hornet sank to the bottom of the Pacific, with 140 crewmen killed in action, and 21 aircraft going down with the ship.
The Hornet was gone. She'd been our home for over a year. In her, we'd lost something that had been part of us. But she would be remembered no matter on what other ships we were to serve. We knew that we had fought the Hornet well, that we had brought destruction to the enemy at Tokyo and Midway, at Guadalcanal, at Ricotta Bay, in the Coral Sea, and at Santa Cruz. She was a great fighting ship.
This would not be the end of the legacy of the USS Hornet. The name of the Hornet would rise again.
Today, we are present at the rebirth of a great name in the history of the United States Navy. The aircraft carrier Hornet, which is being launched here, will be the 8th United States ship to bear that proud name. Each one of the new Hornet's predecessors has added glory to the flag. We are confident that this present ship will be no exception. In her death, the Hornet made doubly sure that she would not die. For besides this ship we are launching here today, we also have the new aircraft carrier Shangri-La. Of neither of these two ships can we ask more than was accomplished by that aircraft carrier Hornet, which now lies in glory in the blue waters of the South Pacific. We are certain, however, that there will be new deeds of valor to keep ever bright the memory of a great name. and we say in confidence and with pride, the Hornet is dead. Long live the Hornet.
So the original Hornet was a part of the Doolittle Raid. It was a part of Midway. It was a part of the campaign at Guadalcanal. And all through 1942, it was just a part of everything. And it was unfortunately sunk at the Battle of Santa Cruz in the fall of '42. And literally, you can imagine the win that the Japanese Empire had over that. And so the next ship that was getting built was the USS Kearsarge. And to throw the enemy off, they decided to just name it Hornet, psych them out. It's like the sequel, the Revenge is coming back. So the second Hornet, which is this ship, went back out in there and must have thrown people off like, hey, didn't we sink that? How was it back? You know, because for intelligence at the time.
This new legacy was now being written on the brand new aircraft carrier, USS Hornet CV-12. And this is the very same ship that we have been on throughout this video. Her journey would begin in early 1944, where she stormed back into the Pacific shortly after being commissioned. This time, instead of Wildcats, SBDs, and Devastators, she was armed with brand new top-of-the-line aircraft, the F-6F Hellcat, the TBF Avenger, and the SB-2C Helldiver. These new and advanced aircraft would go on to be a nightmare for what remained of the Imperial Japanese Navy. But that doesn't mean they weren't also having some fun as they went along.
Every time they would hit a milestone of a landing on the ship, they would bake a cake. So you can imagine if it was like the 1,000th landing or the 10,000th landing or the 20th. Guys wouldn't know for sure when they're in the lineup, but you kind of knew. You're like, I think this is the 9,999th. I wonder if I'm going to get the cake. And so they would come in, land, and then lo and behold, everyone would run out and be like, yay. And then you're like, I guess I'm the guy. I guess I got it. So you get a picture with the captain, you get the first slice of cake, and you know, you made it back. I guess that's what you're happy about most. But you get a picture with the captain and you get cake.
On April 13th, the USS Hornet was officially designated as Rear Admiral Joseph Clark's flagship in Task Force 58. From here, she would lead the American fleet and would waste no time in living up to her name. This is the perfect time to step into some of the places that would have played a major role in commanding Task Force 58.
We're currently located in the island superstructure of the ship. This is the Combat Information Center, for short, the CIC. This is where you would get the intelligence of where the enemy is, where they're coming, where they're going, the ship's formations, the fleet. This is the brain of the ship, and you can imagine how tense it is. Everyone else that works on the ship here is helping in some other way or another, wondering what's going on. Whoever's in this room knows first what's going on. And I can only imagine how tense it is in here. And you can see by all the electronics and everything they have, you probably feel pretty important being in here. This is like the nerve center. This is like
Combat Information
This
Center.
is like Gossip Central. Like, I know exactly what's going on, where we're going, what's coming.
Yep, and the planes that are in the sky,
Yeah.
friendlies will be giving you the friendly signal, whatever that code is for the day. And
Oh, yeah.
if they don't give you the right code, or they don't give answer,
No answer, no code, shoot it down.
see you later, buddy. Dead reckoning tracer. So you could, Loran.
Oh, here.
Have you heard of Loran?
No. Dead Reckoning, Mission Impossible.
Yeah, Loran was just a series of radio towers, and they could zero in where they were just by measuring the radio signal, layman's term. And so you would just, trace out, this would move. This is the early computer. It would move, and just follow where the ship was. where you were going. Over on that far board on the right there would be guys back there writing down in reverse, keeping track of targets that were coming or going. Over on the left there, is the task force from World War II, or it's the center.
Right there.
And these two boards here is where they would be tracking targets coming in.
So you can imagine the Hornet, and this is like the support. Look at that.
They have to get through all those ships to get to the Hornet.
Can you imagine like a dive bomber squadron trying to get to the main character and they got to go through this? Good luck. It's literally like the sounds are speaking for themselves. You can. Everything's like ergonomic. It's like
pleasing to touch.
Yeah, it's like it's so throwback. And you got to do this in that dark, you know?
From here, the attacks would be led against multiple islands and bases across the southwestern Pacific. From the very beginning, the F-6F Hellcat pilots began putting up scores of victories against the Japanese Zeros and other aircraft, making it clear that this new fighter was miles ahead of the old F-4F Wildcat. In fact, she was in many ways specifically designed to take on the Zero. Because of this, she quickly began to allow the US aviators from the Hornet to rack up kills by using speed and armor advantages against the light Japanese aircraft. This would go on throughout March, April, and May of 1944, until reaching its climax in June. Here, the USS Hornet would play a starring role in the battle that would later come to be known as the Marianas Turkey Shoot. In this famous engagement, the United States Navy would meet the remnants of the Imperial Japanese for the last major aerial engagement of the Pacific War. In this fight, the US Hellcats, flown by well-trained naval aviators, would go up against inexperienced Japanese pilots in mostly obsolete planes. The result was total carnage.
In the Second Battle of the Philippine Sea, that's its official name, it actually ended up being casually called the Marianas Turkey Shoot because the American aviators shot down so many, it was just like a bird hunt, shooting slow turkey. And there was so many scores that it was crushing for the enemy to have their air superiority put on their back heels after that. And it gave a lot of confidence to the Allies in the Pacific campaign after that specific battle. And you could just look at the scorecard of the ratios, and you can see how the confidence was coming up, and then you could feel the energy. I'm only guessing back on the ship of like, we can win this thing. Let's take it home.
At the end of the day, the final score was American losses at about 35 planes, but the Japanese more than 300, a ratio of nearly 10-1. In addition to a major victory for the fighters though, one of the most inspirational stories of the war would come when the bombers of the American carriers, including the USS Hornet, took off to strike the Japanese fleet, and ended up coming back to land in the dark with very little fuel. Task Force 58, led by Admiral Clark, lit up their searchlights, exposing themselves to Japanese submarines so that they could get their airmen home. Many of the Navy aircraft would end up landing in the water and would be recovered by ships, which was less than ideal, but thanks to the searchlights, they did make it home.
Right here, just imagine this thing lit up. All those lights turned on. When this thing's lit up, it is a beacon in the middle of the Pacific.
As it was in the Marianas Turkey Shoot. Planes were trying to find their way back home.
Yeah, how else are you gonna find a ship when you have no GPS? Just turn all the lights on, all of a sudden, there, that way, that's where we're at.
Following the Marianas turkey shoot and the rest of that battle, the USS Hornet CV-12 next took part in the invasion of the Philippines, supporting troops on the ground. It was around this time that the threat from organized suicide bombers, the kamikaze, were becoming a new threat.
Also, I can't imagine the amount of pressure you're all feeling if you see a kamikaze. I mean, that's like, if you don't take care of it, you're responsible for probably everybody here. If you're the one, if you're the team and it's on this side, I can't imagine more stress on anyone. You know, when you're an aviator, it's you and your pilot. If you're the anti-aircraft gunner, it's you and everyone on the ship.
This would have been the fuse setting in seconds, which would have determined how far from exiting the gun that the shell exploded. And that was an important deal because if you had the range of the shell wrong, then they would be exploding before or after the aircraft that you were trying to shoot at. And that was incredibly important in the Pacific because the Japanese planes, being so poorly armored, really just needed, you know, a little bit of damage. If you could just light that wing with a spark, then the whole thing was going down. And so these fuse settings were very important, and it was because of the Hornet gunners that operated in these positions on the guns like this that they were not hit by any of the kamikazes that made runs on them.
When you look at the history of the Hornet, everyone always asks, did it ever get hit? It's one of the few Essex-class carriers, one of the few carriers with as much action it had, never got hit.
In the midst of the battle for the Pacific, even with the Japanese clearly on the retreat, the mighty Hornet would still earn her name even more glory.
Air Group 2 wrapped up in September of '44, and the next Air Group 11, joined, and they had a legendary fight. They participated in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, had strikes over Formosa, and made it to Clark Field, and pretty much wrapped up in January of '45. And after that, then Air Group 17 took over, and they participated in campaigns going all the way up to Okinawa and helped assisted with the sinking of the Yamato.
The Yamato was the pride of the Japanese Navy, and essentially the largest warship ever built. She was an icon for the Imperial Navy and a prize target for the United States. In April of 1945, the American fleet intercepted a message that revealed the location of a Japanese naval force, which included the Yamato. In the coming days, American aircraft from multiple carriers, including the Hornet, attacked and struck the warship, along with many others in the force. After eventually taking 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs, the order was finally given to the Yamato crew to abandon ship. Today, a victory mark for the Yamato, along with all of the other kills that she achieved, can be seen in her hangar bay, which is today the main floor of the museum.
When Air Group 11 was done and Air Group 17 took over, you had quite a challenge to how do you top this? Well, at that point, they were like, we're going to bring it home. We're going to actually do a strike on the mainland. And so if you can imagine Air Group 17 on the second Hornet returning back to be the first ones to strike the homeland of the enemy, just like how the first Hornet early in the war helped with the Doolittle Raid, launched that first attack for the homeland. So it was like a bookend where I can only imagine you see the war finally coming to like a close from beginning to end.
In the early summer of 1945, however, the USS Hornet would finally meet an adversary that she could not beat, Mother Nature.
At one point during their campaign, there was an opportunity to take a shortcut to catch the fleet. And at the time, Admiral Halsey made the decision to forge ahead and go through what appeared to be a typhoon. And he said, if we cut through this, we'll get them. And he made the decision to do that and sent the fleet with the Hornet leading, and they went right through that Typhoon, and it was a mess. It not only did it, like, you know, pretty badly damage the ship here, but a lot of other smaller ships didn't make it. And it literally destroyed the whole flight deck. Half of it was just bent over. You can see photos of it. It's the only time where they actually turned the ship around and launched aircraft backwards. So it's quite a show to see one of the only times you've seen a plane go backwards off an aircraft carrier.
Here we can see a photo that shows the severity of the damage to the bow of the flight deck. However, the stern was still in working order, so the Hornet took aircraft off from there instead.
And there were sailors piled up high on the island because they're like, hey, come check this out. And they were all just sitting up there. And so for the first time, the Navy launched planes the other direction, going that way, because why stop? So.
In the weeks that followed, the Japanese would surrender and the war would finally come to an end. Without a doubt, one of the greatest contributors to this victory was the USS Hornet and the brave men who served upon her.
The Hornet's World War II record on this particular ship, CV-12, actually earned it 9 battle stars. And when you measure that and look at it, you could see him hopping across the islands, going all the way up to the mainlands of Japan. And you can follow the second half of the war if you're interested in the Pacific, and just follow Hornet CV-12, and you can see it going all the way there. And if you want to follow the beginning of the war, you can follow the first Hornet CV-8 and see that. So the tales of those two Hornets really tell the story of the Pacific War for the Allies, and from the beginning to the end. If you really want to get an experience, I encourage you to come to this ship. It's one of the very few places you can walk around. You can get a tour, or you can just go explore. It's a really fun place to check out. Not many places let you explore. So.
Today, the USS Hornet CV-12 is a floating museum in Alameda, California. This video would not have been possible without their help, so please consider visiting this incredible piece of history and stand where heroes did more than 80 years ago. Check them out at the link below and give them a visit. You won't regret it. Also, thanks to George Retelas. Make sure to check out his documentary, 11, on Air Group 11 in World War II. And if you want to see all the deleted scenes and behind-the-scenes footage from our time on the USS Hornet, make sure to join my Patreon here so that we can continue to make these videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.